The Columbus Metropolitan Club was founded in 1976 by 13 women leaders who wanted to be included in the community conversation. I am Sally Bloomfield, and I was one of those 13 women. Having been left out of men's clubs that focused on community issues, it was a priority for us to make the club 100% inclusive.
Today, CMC presents public policy forums every Wednesday at lunch with average attendance of more than 200 people. I'm Toni Bell, and I frequently attend forums, which are open to everyone and present relevant, current, and newsworthy topics. I'm grateful that CMC is nonpartisan and presents many perspectives on every topic.
I'm Jane Scott, President and CEO of the Columbus Metropolitan Club. CMC is open to everyone. We invite you to explore the personal and professional benefits awaiting you at the Metropolitan Club. Welcome to CMC.
Welcome to CMC.
Welcome to CMC.
Welcome to CMC.
Good afternoon and welcome to Columbus Metropolitan Club's 45th Anniversary Forum. I'm Steve Marks, and as of about a half hour ago, I am your immediate past chair of CMC's Board of Trustees and president of Hannah News Service here in Columbus. It's my pleasure to welcome our in-person audience today and to say hello to all of you watching via our live stream. Thank you to today's forum sponsor, Bricker & Eckler, and thank you to our dessert sponsor today, American Dairy Association Mid-East. Today, CMC... Go ahead, let's give them a round of applause. Today's CMC live streaming is presented by the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch and PNC. Let's once again thank them. 45 years ago, Columbus, Ohio was a very different place than it is today. Women leaders in Columbus were not included in the city's all-male downtown clubs. 13 of those women decided to create their own club, and so the Columbus Metropolitan Club was born. From the start, CMC welcomes everyone. The very first CMC Forum took place on September 10th, 1976. Today, 45 years later, CMC has nearly 1,200 diverse members. As a community, we are indebted to the 13 women whose leadership created an organization that welcomes everyone to the conversation. And today, it's our great honor and privilege to have two of those 13 visionaries on our stage. We are happy to celebrate their achievement and recognize 45 years of community conversations. Now please welcome Joelle Kuzam with today's forum sponsor, Bricker & Eckler, to introduce our panelists. Joelle?
Thank you, Steve, and thank you all for being here with us today. As you will learn today, women like Mary Lazarus and my friend and colleague Sally Bloomfield are rock stars, unicorns, exceptional role models. Their foresight in 1976 in seeing and filling a need for a place where a growing metro city like Columbus could come together and civilly discuss important topics of the day is a testament to their can-do spirits, and we all are the continuing beneficiaries of their collective effort. They and their 11 colleagues have, through many such actions throughout their careers, continued to help us innovate. They have helped women become confident business leaders. They have turned men into allies, and they have left us all with a legacy of civil discourse through this Columbus Metropolitan Club. At a time when we most need civility and common sense, I am delighted that Bricker & Eckler, which places such a high premium on diversity, including diversity of thought, can sponsor today's forum featuring Mary Lazarus and one of my personal sheroes, Sally Bloomfield. Now I'd like to introduce Toni Bell and Josh Harrison, who will conduct our panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Wow, 45 years. That's incredible. I first want to thank our two guests, along with the other founders of CMC, for making this happen. I want to begin with the origin story. Walk us through how this happened, what was the motivation, what was it like?
45 years is startling. And I think Sally and I both echo what Josh has said. We were two of 13 founders. And fortunately for us, we've survived. Some of them have not, some of them have moved away and are no longer with us here. So we sort of represent that group. And it started with, as I remember, a meeting of women. Actually, it was at the Academy for Contemporary Affairs, which the problem here is that most of you aren't going to be old enough to remember the things that I do. But where we were talking about what were the needs, the real needs that women felt here in the Columbus area. And so I'll start with one and then turn it over to Sally. One was that there were not places, clubs, if you will, that welcomed women as members or even always guests. The University Club, the Columbus Club, the Athletic Club, none of those had women members, and there are some stories about those.
Right, and we'll give you two little vignettes that we experienced concerning the exclusion that women had at that time. But basically, one of the things was we really wanted to be part of the conversation, and without having access to the venues that business people had and other men had, we were left out. So that was one of the biggest reasons for founding the CMC. I think it's important to sort of remember the context of 1976, and that is in your programs today, what was happening, because this was the environment in which we worked to establish the CMC. And we had our own personal experiences of exclusion. I'll start with one, and I know Mary has one too. At the time of the founding, I was a commissioner on the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, and as such, I was asked to give a speech at one of the downtown clubs. And it was after hours, and it happened that our office was right across the street. So I raced across Broad Street, go up the front steps, and there was a knocker, which I knocked on, and took a few minutes, and finally a young lady, or an older lady actually, who was in uniform, came to the door and said, "Oh, no, 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 you cannot enter in the front door." And I was just taken aback. I had no idea this was the policy. So they, after a while, they took me to the rear of the building, and I was able to enter, and I had to give a speech there. So then I climbed up the stairs to the second floor to give my speech. And it sort of went downhill from there. Because at the time I was about 8 months pregnant, and I get to the speakers to be introduced, and the gentleman who was introducing me made all kinds of comments about my pregnancy, and hoping that I wasn't going to deliver right then. So it was the whole experience was pretty memorable. The other thing that I remember from around that time was credit cards. And I had, at that time, women, there were laws that were passed that permitted equal credit, but it hadn't fully blossomed at that point. And so I went to get a credit card, and I was told by the banker, "Well, I'm sorry you don't have any credit." And I said, "Well, wait a minute, I've had credit card since so-and-so. Oh no, that's in your husband's name. He has the credit rating, you don't. So I had to start all over again. And fortunately, I knew two women who were in banking, and they assisted me, and I was able to start all over again getting credit, which had been established like maybe 7 or 8 years before. So that sort of just gives you the context of what we were living with. And Mary has an even better story.
Well, I'm not sure that mine is better. It was at the University Club, and I was doing lobbying work for not-for-profit. I think it was Action for Children, but I'm not sure exactly which agency. And we wanted to take one of the women legislators, state women legislators, to lunch at the University Club and talk to her, about the needs. I'm sure they were budget needs and so forth. And so when I went to make the reservation at the University Club, my husband Bob was a member. I said, there'll be 4 of us or whatever, we would like to come at noon. And they said, oh no, sorry, but if there are women in the group, including the legislator, of course, who was the main thing, women cannot come and have lunch until 1 o'clock. Because naturally, the underlying thing was that women would be, free at 1 o'clock. Well, it happens that at the legislature they were to be back meeting at 1 o'clock. So that didn't sit too well. And I don't remember whether we got it resolved or not. But anyway, so that's one more example of the kind of thing.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm thinking about how much has changed, right, in those 45 years since you started. But when we think about the inception of the organization, can you bring us into some of the conversations? I know, Sally, you said that you were interested in, what are some of the issues of the day that you wanted to address. But can you help us, put us in a meeting with the 13 of you? And what was that like? What were some of the tough points or the points that you decided, yes, now this is exactly what we're going to do?
I don't know that we had an exact idea originally, except we did want to model it very much like the City Club in Cleveland in terms of presenting a panel and discussions and that kind of thing. We had a number of meetings. We had some concerns at the time about, if we build it, will they come? That was one of them for sure. And one of the things, every one of the 13 members worked very hard to get the membership in the beginning. We knew that this club would fail if we could not get members to come, and we were charging, I think, $100, which was a big amount in those days, particularly. And so I can remember many of the meetings having to do with lists and people calling people and checking to see if we could get, because we needed a certain corpus before we could get started. Then there were just the normal operational concerns. Where were we going to meet? That kind of thing.
That would take you even if it wasn't 1 o'clock.
Right. And also there were philosophical discussions about what kind of programming we wanted. And for sure, we decided that we wanted to make sure that there were timely and current topics that were presented, similar to the City Club. We wanted to make sure that it was very balanced, that we had both sides represented. And in fact, one of the sort of tenets in the very first was that we had to have a point-counterpoint. Now, we had to abandon that later, not because the concept wasn't good, because it is, and I think the club still honors all sides, but we could not always get people on each side to speak at a particular time, and that was a problem. And we wanted as many sides as possible to be represented on a given issue. We definitely wanted interaction between the members and the people participating and the speakers, and so the question and answer period started, and I am pleased to see that that is still a very integral part of what's going on today, because that made a lot of difference. And we thought that because there was no group like this or club like this, that we could serve as a catalyst to keep the discussion going, and put out important topics that, that hadn't really been discussed in one place before.
Did you feel that it took a lot of courage? And, oh, go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt you.
Well, no, I was just going to add to that. In an example, our very first forum was, as Jane said, on September 10th, 45 years ago, was on the development of downtown, north and south. And we were talking about it, again, I don't think anyone will remember, Joe Madonna represented this south development, or the real, what we think of as downtown, the Ohio Theater, the Brewery District, all of that. And the north was the convention center, and thanks to some good research, Dick Lasko was the person representing. So it wasn't but Sally's so right. We tried to for a long time, to have 2 points of view. I mean, should more money, go to the north, more money to the south, and how also the issue of how are these going to get connected. So, still of interest today. And then, of course, we had political debates. That was a very big part. They're so much more common now that I'm not sure we do as many with the candidates, or we certainly do occasionally. But we did then have debates between candidates, and also issues. I think, whatever the issues on the ballot were, that was often a subject.
So since its founding, it's been wildly successful from the outside looking in. But from your perspective, was there ever a moment of crisis or resistance where you thought, maybe this isn't going to work out?
Well, I was thinking about that. Probably the biggest moments of crisis were financial. Were we going to be able to make it? We wanted to, as Sally said, it was a steep price, but we didn't want to make it any steeper, and we've been very good about, we certainly haven't kept up with inflation, but we wanted it to be accessible. But I think in downturns in the economy, and I can't talk about the exact dates, and this is in large part, I think, due to Jane's leadership, when we began to get corporate sponsors. That made all the difference in keeping us afloat. I don't think we ever hit a real crisis like we're going to have to close next week, but there were times where it was questionable. Would we have enough members? Now we get, of course, so many guests. That wasn't always true in the beginning.
Well, I can certainly speak to where the CMC has come for me. I remember being at the Columbus Athletic Club, being a young professional, and still kind of a young professional. You're welcome. And I can say that the CMC has meant so much to me in terms of the variety and the diversity of thought. And I found myself coming to forums that are on topics that I normally wouldn't have thought about, but I said, seems interesting, let me go. And I found that the ones I've come to that are outside of my bailiwick have been the most inspiring. So that's pleasing to me, and I would imagine it's the same way for our members. What has surprised you most about how far the CMC has come?
Well, I would say, first of all, the membership is wonderful in terms of numbers, and that was a struggle, particularly for the first several years. We had about 400, and it went up to 500, and we were holding on at 500 for some time. I think the fact that the original tenets that we started with in terms of the balanced discussion and the diversity and absolute inclusion, that of course has stayed. And so I think the essence has remained the same, although it's certainly improved over the years. The programs have improved, the offerings to the members have improved. I mean, it's just been wonderful. Personally, I couldn't have foreseen it being as successful as it has been, particularly after 45 years.
We haven't mentioned it, and you probably were going to, that from the very beginning, we're the 13 women, and we did have quite a number of meetings before we launched. And of course, one of the big issues was, were we going to invite men to join? And I think that is one of the most fundamental decisions that we made. We were sure from the beginning that we were going to be open to men and women, whomever.
There was a debate about that. It didn't last too long, but I think everybody in the room was thinking about the sting that each of us had experienced, and so that's why the question came up at first. But then we thought, well, we would be utter hypocrites if we didn't admit everybody and admit men in particular. That was, admitting men was the issue, nothing else. All the other inclusionary inclusion was assumed, but men, it took a little discussion to get through that one.
And it sounds like it would be more like a conversation around fairness. Well, they didn't let us in, so why should we let them in? And, you know, yeah, but you're welcome.
Yeah. Thanks again. So speaking of impact, do you have a favorite forum or a forum that you consider most impactful in terms of changing public perception or policy?
You know, I personally don't, because everything is very thoughtful and you can't tell immediately, you know, what's going to happen from a conversation. But I do think that having the number of forums and of the quality of forums, I think they've had a large impact on the community generally. As you know, they're covered widely by the media, which is good, and frequently that's the only time you hear that point of view. If you weren't able to attend the CMC, then you at least get a report in the media, which is great, and I think that does help a lot. Also, before, well, the balance is very important. I think before we were listening to, like say, a politician had a personal view on X, Y, Z, and if that politician was covered, that's all you'd see. You wouldn't see the other side. And I think the other sides, or the many sides, were very important. So I think it's hard to measure the impact until maybe years later. But the fact that everybody keeps coming and they keep being interested in the conversations, I think is impact by itself.
I couldn't. I tried to think too of one. I mean, there are some memorable ones, but the fact that for a number of years we were the place where the mayor gave the state of the city. You know, now that's gone on to other things, and so many other places now where there is discussion, but there weren't then. I mean, it's sort of hard to remember, but there really weren't places for lively, good discussion. So there were a lot, and as Sally said, the fact that we are sort of an institution now, I think, is pretty amazing.
Wow. When I think about 45 years, Josh, and I think about, you know, what was going on 45 years ago to today, now I recognize that, now I recognize that, you know, we've got the future to think about. You were the visionaries. You and your 11 friends together were visionaries at a time when there was a different vision for the country and the way things were going. What would you like to see in the next 45 years?
Wow. Well, I think, but I can think of a few things. One thing where I think we did not give as much thought to or do as much in the beginning as we might have was the inclusiveness, and particularly the inclusiveness of minority populations. Among those 13 women, I'm sorry to say, there was no one of color. That, looking back on it, that's not good at all. But I think we have tried in recent years, and most especially, of course, in the last couple of years, to redress that balance. We have a long way to go, as we all know. I think the programs that have been done since the George Floyd events and so forth on race have been just absolutely outstanding.
I think that deserves a round of applause.
Yeah. I just think that I guess if I was going to think of one accomplishment, I think the pivoting with COVID and then with the race issues has been absolutely remarkable. And that credit certainly goes to the young board members and to the wonderful staff that we have.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Add to that, and I absolutely agree with everything Mary said, in the future, I think it's more important today, and maybe, and hopefully this will be a short term, but the civility aspect, especially after we've just come through the 4 years that we've come through. I mean, that was lost, and it's so important that there's an institution that promotes civility, which the CMC certainly does. And I would hope that that would continue. I would also hope that that wouldn't be as big a need in the future as it is now, but I think it needs to be on the menu at all times.
I wouldn't bet on that. I think it will be a need. Well, and it seems to be a constant. In previous conversations, we were talking about civility in 1976 and how that was top of mind for you. So could you compare and contrast what was happening then and now as it relates to civility?
Night and day. I mean, we thought it was uncivil then. We hadn't seen anything yet.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, so when you think about 45 years ago, one of the items on the 1976 menu was Fidel Castro had just come into power. There was a lot of unrest where the political climate might be. There was an Olympics, everything was going on. And Sally, if I can take it back to you, you said that when you guys were thinking about the CMC, you were pregnant when you had the event at the athletic club?
That's right, but that was a couple years before we founded CMC.
Okay.
That preceded.
So you still had a youngster. You still had a youngster, and you had a flourishing career, and something that many people ask themselves, and you've got a young and seasoned professionals, but it always seems like we're always looking for what's the work-life balance. And then it sounds like there were a lot of hours that each of you put into making the CMC, launch. What was the sacrifice that each of you had to make, right? In addition to all the other responsibilities, you were doing something, and did you think, oh, we're gonna change the world, or did you just think we just need to make some change? But either way, you invested the time. So what was that? What did you have to sacrifice in order to make CMC launch?
Well, I don't remember sacrificing anything, really. I mean, because most of us that were the founders were doing other things. We had a rich life in terms of what we call extracurricular. And I think the thing that made it easier, if you will, were that all 13 of us rolled up our sleeves and we were working together. And so that was inspirational for each of us. And it didn't make it seem as if it were a burden at all.
It was just a part of what you were doing with your world.
That's right.
Yes, I would agree with that. Actually, our first staff were just one part-time, our very first, it was a one part-time person. And it's still very lean, and they do a great job. And through the years, we have been extremely fortunate to have wonderful, wonderful staff and executive directors. And I think Sally's so right, and it makes me think that this has all been sort of a joint effort. Certainly that group of us, and then the first board and so forth. I mean, the first year, I know my first assignment was with Lou Briggs, some of you knew. She and I were the program committee, so we had to come up with a once a month program. They weren't once a week, and not nearly as complex as this. And then we went through a period where we had these small weekly midweeks where some member actually spoke about some issue that he or she was interested in. So we sort of evolved, but it's been the members that have made this, the board, the staff, and the members who've made this club work.
So you mentioned our coverage of George Floyd. Were there any controversial or uncomfortable or provocative topics in the decades after the founding that you can remember?
Yes, I can remember Phyllis Schlafly.
Yes, I knew you would say that.
Yes. She was a national figure who was anti-ERA. And the thought was we would have a point-counterpoint. Well, we could find no one that wanted to argue with a national figure, which I can understand from Columbus. That was the problem. So then the debate became, do we cancel this, or do we go to something else or not? And we eventually decided no, this was a point of view. None of us, I will have to say, none of us on the board held that point of view, but we thought it was important for people to understand the point of view. So we went ahead and had her. And we did experience an outcry from some of the members. I think they must have forgotten that we were, that part of the goal was to have diversity in thought and discussion and issues. But anyway, and I think we did have, I don't think we didn't have a whole bunch of people leaving, but we did have some people that said, that's it, I'm not, if you're gonna have Phyllis Schlafly, I'm not coming. And that was scary. And I think it was courageous on the part of the board to go ahead when we realized that we weren't going to have the counterpoint, and we also knew that some of our members would be very disappointed.
Yeah, I remember that one very, very well too. And there was some discussion, well, should we go? Should we show up? Does that mean we're supporting her? And I remember going. I do remember, I can almost see where I was sitting, that some of us at our table didn't clap for her. But we showed up, and we've always been polite, I think, at CMC. We listen to other points of view, and
Well, thank you for that. I can only imagine. I'd love to go back. Was that one recorded? Yeah, there were
some other.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, as we're going to ask you your final question before we go to the audience's Q&A, because I'm sure that our friends online are chomping at the bit, as well as members of our audience who would love to ask some questions. I'm thinking about the other impact of the CMC, right? It's the networking and the friendship building. What feeling must it give you on the inside to know that so many business relationships and even lifelong friendships have happened because of just the thoughtfulness and the mindfulness that you had 45 years ago? And yeah, I mean, I can think about stories about how I've personally benefited, but what feeling must that give you in addition to the goosebumps I've got right now, and probably Josh?
I thought of, and I had in my little notes here, was the networking, which you just brought up. I think that's something maybe we haven't talked about that has been a real byproduct, if you will, or part of the success, the reason people come. I thoroughly enjoy walking in and sitting down with people that I don't know. I also like coming and meeting up with people that I haven't seen for a long time, like now. But I think that that networking, and then I was also thinking we've done some off-site things that have been really good. In fact, I'm looking at my son down here. When you were talking about what did we sacrifice, I said, well, you'd have to ask my kids. Was I ever home? But anyway, but I remember one that you went to where you got to drive a car, new cars that at the Ohio State where they developed the new cars. We had a thing there, and there have been a lot of others. I remember learning so much about the what the Thompsons do at Ohio State with the polar. Those are just things that stick, you know. Yes, polar research. Things like that. I'm with you. Some of the ones that have meant the most to me were about things that I didn't know anything about.
Absolutely. How about you, Sally?
I think the networking we noticed right away. I remember after one of the very first forums, the buzz in the room, the fact that people did not leave immediately after the forum, they stuck around. You could see people introducing themselves to each other. It was a great feeling. It was really great, and it still continues today.
Right, the buzz. I was thinking that so much. I remember at the athletic club, if all this conversation, unfortunately, COVID has put a little crimp into that, but hopefully we'll be back.
Just a little crimp, because when we're online, and when I'm joining online, I'm able to chat with people, and I see that there's a healthy community, the robust online community, and people have gone back and watched it. So, COVID be darned, we've swiveled.
We are about to go to audience questions, but before we do, I want to ask one last question. As we go into the next 45 years and hopefully beyond with CMC, what do you hope we never lose? As we change and evolve, what do you hope we never lose?
Oh, I hope you never lose, the club never loses the basically what I would call the tenets, which would be the always having timely topics, current topics, that presenting as many sides as possible, always civil, and the provision of interaction between members and guests and the speakers, and finally serving as a catalyst for things to come and for people to come and for the discussion to be continued. I think those are very important, very important.
I don't think I can add much to that. I hope we become more and more inclusive and accessible.
Excellent. Jane, I believe you have some questions for us.
I have a couple questions from people online, and I would encourage any of you in the room who have questions, come up please, and we're going to do every other question for online plus in-house. I know I have a lot of board members in the room, former board members, so I think we'll waive the no editorial comments today, and if anybody has a special memory to share with Mary and Sally, that would be fun for them as well. And I'll share one from Mike Loers. Some of you might remember Mike Loers, who was a PR executive. When I first started with this job, he came to meet with me, and he said that he wanted me to know that the ladies recruited him to be on one of their first boards, and they promptly elected him to be secretary. So I think that is so fitting. Kathy Fox asks, Mary and Sally, what are the biggest accomplishments of CMC that you might not have envisioned when you helped with the founding?
Jane, could you just repeat that?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. What are the biggest accomplishments of CMC that you may not have envisioned when you helped with the founding?
Well, I guess I don't know that we've said about the networking. I mean, I don't remember that was a founding. I mean that probably was in the back of our minds, but there's been much more of it. Another thing that I think's been wonderful is in the beginning, and I read this somewhere, that the audiences were very heavily weighted with women and a minority of men. I think that has definitely changed. We often have, hopefully we have about equal, but we have lots of men, and the men are always very good at asking questions, and I'm always poking the women and saying, get up there and ask one. But can you think, I just never, like Sally, I never dreamed that it would become as much of an institution in the community as it is, and I'm delighted.
And institution and stature. I think
Yes.
that's the word, because, you know, this was a small group, we had no idea, but CMC is really a potent organization at this point. It's people are very, very respectful of it. It is covered in the media a lot, which for good things, not for bad things. And that's taken a while to get to that point. And I think I would go back to Mary. I think the thing that sort of catapulted it into that echelon, if you will, was the mayor's state of the city, which happened about a year or so after we were founded. If I recall correctly, we asked him for 1 year and he said no, and then he came to the second year. And then it became a tradition until fairly recently that that's where it would be. And I think that really added to the stature.
Renee Delane from Women Who Dare, and I have a question for each of you, amazing women.
Very, very slowly, because they cannot hear you very well up there.
Okay. Just a question for both of you, amazing women, is that if you could go back in time into history or at the present time, who would you love to see up here for the forum that you could ask questions of?
Who would you love to see?
Don't forget that we're up here from 45 years ago, so maybe our hearing isn't quite as good. Who would you
love to see that you haven't seen?
Oh.
Somebody, let me speak a little louder, if I may. Anybody in the past, in history or present, that you would love to see at a forum here, CMC Forum?
The programming has been so good. I don't feel a lack of having heard different points of view or from different people. And the other thing is, the CMC has never had a huge budget, so it's not like you're going out to the nation and picking up, you know, being able to pick whoever you want. We've been very lucky to have national figures such as senators and representatives talk from time to time, and that's been wonderful. We've had great authors that have come and talked here, so I think we've done really fine. I really don't, I can't think of anybody that we're missing, if you will.
Hi, I'm DJ Buchanan, board member. Did I hear you correctly that your first meetings were at the athletic club? No.
The first meetings I went to were, their first meetings were
Where,
first meetings.
where did you end up?
Meetings were a motorist mutual, I
Motorist
believe.
Mutual.
Is that?
So were you able to make all that happen, or did they want to talk to your husbands, or did they want to talk to the male representatives there?
Oh no, I have a feeling that we were a small but mighty little group. The Columbus Foundation was very supportive of us right from the beginning, and one of the founders was a woman named Lita Marding, who invited us for our first few meetings just of the group at the Columbus Foundation. And I think we were able to enlist, I don't know, Jane, whether what kind of rent we had to pay there, or
I think it was pretty gratis.
but I think
No, it was, which was really wonderful.
yeah, no, I think the number of the corporations, and then, oh, you know, we had lots of iterations. We did have a small office. By the way, you know, one of our original thoughts was, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have a club, and club rooms and so forth, where women were welcome. Well, it wasn't very long after that that the Capitol Club, which you remember at the Huntington, opened, and they did invite women from the beginning. So then that sort of, and anyway, we didn't have the money to do anything grandiose like that. But I think the community was quite receptive.
Do you know how long it took the athletic club or the Columbus Club to accept women? I don't know.
I was trying to think. I think after the Capitol Club, I know that my husband Bob was very active in trying to get the University Club to change
That
their.
was second. The athletic club was third, and the Columbus Club was the last of the downtown clubs.
So Bill Lafayette from Regionomics has this memory. My first meeting was part of the series on LGBTQ life in Columbus. This was 2002, and that was still kind of under the radar then. I was hooked immediately.
Thanks. Hi, my name's Karen Twynham, and I started my career in 1976 and was not allowed to go with the other guys in the office to events. So I'm curious, you were talking about the Columbus Club opening and things like that, but what was the reaction of the men being in the room with the women at the Metro Club, and did that impact eventually some of the other businessmen's clubs in Columbus?
Well,
There weren't a whole lot in the beginning. I have utmost respect for them, and they, but as time went on and the organization got more coverage and the topics continued to be more interesting and so forth, more and more men joined. And I think one of the things that did really enhance men's joining was the corporate sponsorships. Because when the corporations sponsored the CMC, they sent their people, and a lot of those people were men. So that sort of evened out the.
And I think the example and I hope, influenced other companies and other men. It's been, you know, all part of the movement that we've seen.
I'm Joel Tieford, and I was one of those men. And one other thing is we did have club rooms at the Atlas building for a while.
Right.
That was, well, I was president when that was going on, and that was a struggle constantly.
That's right, was Joel, thanks for remembering that. Was that the time, at one point, is that on, the Atlas buildings on Long Street?
Yeah.
Okay.
In Long and High.
We even had a tiny little lunch service there, remember?
Yeah.
You could come in, bring a friend or a guest and order from a very limited menu, a sandwich or a quiche or something, and there were a few tables. So that was another evolution. Another thing we did was, no, wait a minute, why was that? We were at the chintz room, or the room at Lazarus, because something closed, where, darn. And you could go there in this little small dining room. There was a private little dining room off the chintz room on the 5th floor at Lazarus, and you could, the CMC ran that for a year, but there was some reason. Does anyone remember why? I don't know why that happened, but I just thought of it when you brought up. So we went through a lot of exactly.
Hi, I'm Carol Newcomb. I was a recent chair of CMC, and I want to thank you for your vision to start this organization. I also wanted to share with you the recognition that CMC has. I recently got an award from OSU at the most recent graduation, and what they mentioned was my involvement in CMC. So you've started something that I think is really great, and it's come a long way. Thank you.
Well, and here's a closing thought that talk about networking. Kathy Fox, another memory from her, she said she was going to a CMC midweek program, and a guy named Joe Aludo presented a big idea for the OSU Business School to have its own buildings. Goodbye, Haggerty Hall. Who knew then where he would take it? So you never know who you're going to meet at the Metropolitan Club, right? So, Toni, you have some closing chores.
Thank you very much. What an honor to spend time with you, and I hope that we get to spend even more time together. So let's give a toast to 13 amazing women who dared, 45 years of conversation extraordinaire, unity and community at its very best. We followed their vision at their behest. Each week at the Columbus Metropolitan Club, it's like getting leadership lessons from the pub. They lure us in with food and drink and a range of conversations that make us think about the best future we can mindfully create. And now we're here to celebrate. To Mary and Sally and generations of CMC family, let's give 3 cheers to the power of us and we. Hear, hear.
So, very lovely. That was lovely.
Cheers.
Wow, this is a first. This is a first, at least for me.
Excellent, excellent. What a wonderful day we had here today. I really hope you enjoyed the historical look back on 45 years of CMC. It is an honor to be involved with this organization, and it's an honor to be on the same stage as people who had the vision to start it. So once again, let's thank them. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please make plans to join us next Wednesday as CMC marks the 20th anniversary of September 11th with our forum 9/11, We Were There. Our thanks today to today's forum sponsor, Bricker and Eckler, and our dessert sponsor, the American Dairy Association Mideast, to the Emergency Response Fund of the Columbus Foundation for presenting our live stream in partnership with the Columbus Dispatch and PNC, and thank you to our online virtual patrons. And our special appreciation and thanks to our guests of honor, Sally Bloomfield, Mary Lazarus, and our hosts, Toni Bell and Josh Harrison. Thanks all of you for joining us for an annual meeting in this special anniversary. We look forward to seeing you next Wednesday as the Columbus Metropolitan begins its 46th year of community conversations.